The words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Amen. Please have a seat. So for those of you who were here yesterday, I'm prepared today. So I'm not going to say no rambling, but less rambling. Advent is the beginning of our liturgical year. It's when our calendar starts every year. It's a season of expectation. In Advent, we look back to the expectation of ancient Israel, longing for their Messiah, as we also look forward to the return of Jesus. In many ways, Advent brackets some of the most important events in history. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he pronounced it good. And through sin, death, and pain, and things like that entered the world and fractured our relationship with God. You know, we're told in the garden, Adam walked with God. But after the fall, that no longer happened. And we look forward to the beginning, or the event Advent points to, the Nativity, when God became man and lived among us, experienced what we experienced, faced all the challenges we faced, worked, paid bills. I mean, we don't think about that, but he lived for 33 years and worked as a builder. I know we think he's a carpenter, but the word tecton means builder, so it's interesting to think of Jesus as a general contractor. That's what my dad was. So he experienced lots of frustration if that was his job. But anyway, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and this enabled a restoration of that broken relationship between man and God. And the culmination of our history will be his coming again with glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. Now, looking back, Israel waited, watched, and prayed for the Messiah for hundreds of years, but when he came, they missed him. They were blinded by their own conception of what the Messiah would be, what he would do, what he would look like. They had their preconceived ideas. And when the Son of God came, born to a carpenter and his wife in a barn, that wasn't what they were looking for. They didn't want to deal with that. So they completely missed him. As he grew up and began his ministry, he reached out to them, he preached to them, he healed people in front of them, did all kinds of miracles. And again, he didn't look like what they were looking for, so they were like, we don't want to mess with that guy. Again, preconceived notions, they were blinded. John came and said, prepare ye the way of the Lord. And they sent people to ask John, who are you? What are you about? So they were interested. But they didn't like his answer, so ultimately what happened to John? Yeah. So their religion at the time, the Jews, they were the church people of the day. Their religion was caught up in rules and rituals. They had rules to keep from breaking rules, to keep from breaking rules. So externally they all looked pretty good, but the problem with their religion was it was all external. It didn't get inside. They conducted their religious rituals mostly through intermediaries, priests and prophets, and they did all the right things, but there was not a heart change. They also forgot that the God that brought them out of Egypt with signs and wonders. I think most of us remember what those were. I mean, for one, he parted the Red Sea. That was a pretty big deal. Led them in the desert by a pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. They got hungry. He dropped food for them. They were thirsty. He told Moses where to whack the rock and get water. They saw all those things. They celebrate them every year at Passover. But they forgot that God is God and can act how he wants to, and often acts in unexpected ways. I doubt, seriously, very many of them were expecting the Red Sea to part. I think they thought they were goners. In fact, some of them were saying, hey, we better go back. And then boom. So they knew that God could do unexpected things. But they were caught up in their rituals and their rules. It was all external and not internal. And Jesus very directly called them out on this. He said, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Fear like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So in other words, he was, if you've been to the cemetery and you've seen a crypt in the cemetery, that's what he was calling you. Looks pretty good on the outside, but there's nothing alive in there. Now, it's not my place to judge these people. All I know about their world is what I can read in books, but there's a lesson in their behavior for us. Reading in the second Sunday of Advent, Paul says, "Whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope." So those things exist for our instruction. In Timothy, the book of Timothy, Paul also warns us that people like that will exist in the church. He warns Timothy about people who have a form of godliness but deny the power thereof, and says, "From such turn away." And then he goes on to say some uncomplimentary things about them, concluding with the fact that they're always learning, but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Now, I don't know how many of you know anything about AA, but in AA, they're fond of saying the longest distance in the world is the 18 inches from here to here. Now, to get sober, you can know all kinds of things, but it requires a change inside yourself, which results in a change of behavior. And we don't want to be like the Pharisees and be caught up in our worldview and our preconceived ideas and miss what God's doing in our lives. Our religion also has rules, rituals, vestments, things like that. And there's nothing wrong with those things. Those things are very useful tools which point us to Christ and help us to deepen our walk of faith with the Lord. They're also a very valuable part of our tradition and our history in a line that goes way, way, way back. So I'm in no way saying that we need to throw those things out or even modify them. But what I do want to say very clearly is that those things by themselves won't save us. Those things go along with a change in here. Those things help us develop a relationship with Jesus, which is where everything begins and everything ends. We have to be willing to submit to the will of God and let God be God in all aspects of our lives. And I can tell you, you probably think, oh, well, he's the Archbishop, he's got it all down. No, I argue with God all the time. I rarely want to let God be God, and I get slapped around a little bit, and then I'm like, all right, whatever, I give up. The gospel for the second Sunday of Advent talks about the signs of Christ's return. There are a lot of people that think they can pinpoint when Jesus is coming back. There have been a lot of them that have made predictions very publicly, and they've turned out to be wrong. Now, I'm not going to tell you when he's coming back, because the truth of the matter is I don't know. I don't really even care. I just know that he is coming. I might live a long life, and Jesus might come for me peacefully in my own bed, or with the life I have today, he might chase me down and say, come on, it's time. And I'd be like, well, I need to finish this first. I don't think I'd say that to Jesus. Or I might be here to witness him coming on a cloud of glory and take us all back. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And personally, I don't think it's my job to worry about when that's going to happen. Because in Matthew, Jesus said, but of that day and hour knoweth no man, not the angels in heaven, but my Father only. As in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark. And the flood came and took them all away. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Watch therefore, for you know not at what hour your Lord will come. So our job is to be ready. It's not to know when he's coming. It's not like, I used to work in mental health, and mental health agencies are notorious. When the auditors are coming, it's like a 3-week marathon period of getting everything right. That's not the way we do things. We do things the way I did when I became an administrator. And you keep things up, keep things in order, be audit ready all the time, so when they show up, you just say, the charts are in there, get what you want, let me know when you're done. That's the way we should live our lives. Now, in terms of living our lives and being ready, there are a few things that others should be seeing in our lives. And every Sunday we hear this. We heard it a few minutes ago. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So we're back to relationship. We're to love God, which enables us to fully and correctly love ourselves. And out of our love for God and our love for ourselves, we're able to love other people. You want to know why we have so many divorces today? People are damaged. They don't love themselves. They're looking for someone else to fix them. And that never works. So Jesus not only spelled out how we should live our Christian life and what we need to do to get to heaven, he spelled out how we can live our secular lives and be happy and healthy in our relationships as well. We have to have a relationship with our Creator. We have to love God. We have to learn to love ourselves. And then we share that love with other people. That's one of the things that people should be seeing in us. Then there are other things we should be doing. In the 25th chapter of Matthew, Jesus tells a story about two lines of people, the sheep line and the goat line. 25th chapter of Matthew. Now, the people in the sheep line didn't know why they were there. People in the goat line didn't know why they were there. So he told them. He said, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Now he said this to the people in the sheep line. Obviously the goat's got a different story. But the people in the sheep line said, when did we do all that? And he said, as much as you've done it to the least of these my brethren, you've done it unto me. That's that loving other people. And that's from Christ himself. Jesus also said later on in Matthew, go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always, even unto the end of the world. Our relationship with Jesus should produce action. Now, Anglicans like to think that some of the things I've just talked about are things the clergy should be doing. And yes, the clergy should be doing it. But in neither of those stories I shared with you did Jesus say, Bishop Crowder, go feed the poor, go clothe the naked, Avery, go visit the sick and visit the people in prison. He didn't tell Carl to go preach the gospel to all nations. He said, you. So you means me, them, these guys, and all of you as well. It's all our job. Yesterday, in my rambling, unexpected sermon, I referred to the fact that we had 4 orders of ministry in the building. We had bishops, priests, a deacon, and we had lay people. We have different functions within the church. But at the bottom line, we're all ministers. And at the bottom line, we all share the same mission, to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. All of us. We do it in different ways, but that's all of our job. Now, lost my place. There used to be bumper stickers that said, Jesus is coming, look busy. Anybody remember those? I think that was in the 70s. I think most of us remember the 70s. Maybe they don't. But that's a good thing. Someday you'll look back to the 2000s. People will look at you like, what's he talking about? I don't think we should look busy. I think we should be busy. And Jesus told us what we should be doing. He gave us very specific instructions. There are also things that people should see in our lives. I spent most of my life as a counselor, largely working with folks in the criminal justice system. Now I work as a nurse. But in both of those roles, if I'm going to draw a conclusion about a patient, or I'm going to put something, say that a patient's improving or whatever, I need to say, as evidenced by, I need to say what I'm observing, or what lab results or whatever there are that indicate that the patient is improving or that the patient is getting worse. So our conclusions are based on observable evidence. Same with our lives as Christians. There should be some evidence that people can see. Now, Carl gets to be the straight man to my comic genius, and I pick on him all the time because he goes around with me, but if I tell you that Bishop Brown is a good Christian, you could ask me where's the proof. So I'll tell you where the proof is. Paul tells us how we can know. He says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. He says we're to be kindly affectioned to one another with brotherly love, not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, instant in prayer, distributing to the necessity of the saints. He says we're not to repay anyone evil for evil, to provide all things honest in the sight of all men, and in so much as lies within us, we're to be peaceful with all men. So I don't want Carl to feel like some kind of plaster saint and get puffed up, but I see these things in Carl. I have seen him in good times, I've seen him in bad times, and I see the evidence. In fact, I see more evidence in his life than I do in my own, which may not be a great endorsement for your Archbishop, but at least I'm honest. Give me that. But other people should be able to see these things in us as well. All of us, not just clergy. If we have a relationship with Christ, that internal relationship, that heart change, is going to produce observable evidence that other people will see and that we will see in our own lives, in our actions. We shouldn't have to tell people about it. They should see it. I don't normally travel in clericals, and if you stick around long enough, you'll see me switch back to civilian clothes. I work secular jobs, so I don't even normally wear clericals. But I was asked one time at one of the OAC conferences, you don't travel in clericals? No, why not? And I just said, well, if people can't tell I'm a priest by the way I speak and what I'm doing, then I don't even deserve to wear the shirt. And that's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, if it's not there in my actions and in what I do on a day-to-day basis, how I talk to people, how I treat people, I don't have any business wearing that shirt. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people wearing those shirts who maybe shouldn't, but I'm not their boss, and it's not my place to judge them. But anyway, that straight off topic, there should be evidence in our lives of our relationship. In the second Sunday of Advent, Luke told us there would be signs in the sun and moon and in the stars and upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, seeing the waves roaring, men's hearts failing for fear and for looking after those things coming on the earth, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. We live in interesting times. Our society's changed, and maybe not for the better. Looks like we may have a little bit of a period of sanity, but if you look around, it seems like the world just gets crazier and crazier. Can't turn on the news without hearing about a shooting. There are school shootings, all kinds of insanity, craziness. One of our clergy in the Philippines posted a thing on Facebook yesterday. Someone had abandoned an infant behind one of their churches, and you could tell from the picture that it was a newborn. Just craziness. So if we look around at all that, it's easy to get discouraged and think, oh my, it's all, going to pot. But that's not our job. We're not supposed to worry about it, because that passage goes on to say, when you see these things come to pass, lift up your heads, your redemption draweth nigh. So we can't rest, we can't remain silent, we have a job to do. We need to remember that every generation has had its challenges. Probably every generation thought the world was going to hell in a handbasket. And it's just our turn. It's human to look around and be discouraged. Even John the Baptist sent people to Jesus to say, hey, are you the guy or should I look for another one? So John the Baptist, who was Jesus' cousin, who had known him from birth, knew his mission. Even he had enough pain, enough discouragement to say, are you the one? And what did Jesus tell John's disciples when he sent them back? He said, go and show John those things which you do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And in our moments of doubt and discouragement, the answer is the same. What do you see and hear? God hasn't ceased to act within human history. Miracles still occur. Some are as bold and open as in the days of the apostles, although those seem to be rare. Some are more subtle. But the proof of God's action in our life is present if we choose to look. Now, admittedly, sometimes things look pretty bleak and it's hard to spot. But I promise you that it's there. So when these things come to pass, look up, lift your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. So when the world gets crazy and we see things we never imagined we'd see, we should remember to lift up our heads and not be afraid. Scripture tells us God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. We're also told that perfect love casts out fear. We're back to that relationship. Our relationship with Jesus strengthens us to face whatever comes with confidence. Not confidence in world events or society, but confidence in the end of the story. Because we know how the story ends. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. Now, I've set a pretty high mark in this little talk, and it probably seems impossible. Certainly seems that way to me sometimes. But I'm going to go back to AA because they have a lot of good slogans if you've never looked at any of them. But one of the things they talk about is progress, not perfection. There was only one person who ever lived who was perfect, and that was Jesus. We have an obligation to try. We have an obligation to do our best, but we're never going to be perfect. So, like the folks in AA, we're looking for progress, not perfection. Now, that doesn't mean we're off the hook. We have to try. We have to make progress. But when it seems like we're not progressing, our relationship with Jesus will help us make progress. The Holy Spirit will help us make progress. We're not just abandoned and left on our own. So although there are only a couple days remaining in Advent, I wanted to leave you with these thoughts and encourage you to use what's left of the season, the next couple of days, to examine your life, strengthen your relationship with Jesus, and continue to do that daily as we await his coming again. On behalf of the House of Bishops of the Convocation of Anglican Churches, I want to thank you for your hospitality this weekend. I want to thank you for being willing to share your bishop with us, or your rector, who's now a bishop. I promise you we're not going to take him away, drag him out, make him go do something else, and send you somebody you may or may not like. We're not going to do that. I'm not that kind of guy. This is your parish. So he will, have to travel occasionally. Probably not as much as I do. But that's, part of the job. But he'll be here. He'll continue to be your rector. And I also want to wish each of you a little bit early, but I want to wish you a very happy Christmas and a happy New Year.